Welcome everybody to the launch of Slipstreaming in the west of Ireland, a unique poetry collection authored by Jim Burke and John Liddy, the founding fathers of the Stony Thursday Book. Came out in the megalithic times. One of Ireland's longest running poetry journals. This is also the third poetry book launch from Revival Press during our April's Poetry Month in Limerick Festival. It is also the 8th live event of the festival. Slipstreaming recalls a cycling trip around West Clare, Galway, Connemara and Inishmore in 1972 by the then fledgling poets John Liddy and Jim Burke. They chronicled their trip by writing a journal filled with swapped entries, sometimes prose, sometimes poems. And after 50 years, the poets reflect on that journey by writing new poems that explore the passage of time and the different stages of life, from childhood to old age. They contemplate the growth and decline that occur throughout one's journey, both physically and emotionally. This much anticipated collection is a collaboration of their two voices finding harmony with each other in poems that are subtle, spare and precise. This is John Liddy's 12th poetry collection and follows the hugely successful Arias of Consolation, which was published by Revival Press in 2021. He lives in Spain. Jim Burke has had many poems in many journals and has published his work in collaboration with other poets throughout the years. He is a graduate of the MA in Creative Writing from Manchester University. He lives in Limerick. The collection will be launched by poet Anton Floyd. But first, a word from the publishers. Specifically, Tommy Collins, the poetry editor of Revival Press. Tommy.
Agus tá fóiltear Galéir Gorgia Knox Cuig Seola an Leabhar Seo Slipstreaming in the west of Ireland, the John Liddy agus Jim Burke. Seo Leabhar Céad Seach ó Dó chuir tús leis an Tunsbal Flight World Pobal in Limerick Writers Centre. So hello everybody and welcome this evening, where we will celebrate the release of John Liddy and Jim Burke's fantastic collaboratively written book Slipstreaming in the west of Ireland. I'm Tommy Collins, the poetry editor at Revival Press, which is the poetry imprint of the Limerick Writers Centre. I'm just going to spend a few minutes telling you a bit about what we do at Limerick Writers Centre, especially our community publishing programme. Tonight we celebrate our 172nd publication since this journey began back in 2009. And as Tom said, it's also the third book launch of April's Poetry Month in Limerick 2024. We have been working hard to make a mark in the world of literature around Limerick City and County and beyond, bringing book ideas and writing to people of all ages, locally and across the country. Trouble with technology. At Limerick Writers Centre, we're all about celebrating literature. We love reading, we're passionate about writing, and we truly believe in the power of words to change lives and communities. Whether it's a poem, a novel, a memoir, a short story, or even a song, we think every creative piece is valuable and deserves to be shared and remembered, whether that's through publication or performance. We have adopted the words of John Millington Synge as our mantra and motto that poetry must have its roots in the clay and the soil of our communities. Our goal is to make literature more accessible and exciting, to celebrate the wisdom and lived experience of real people in Ireland today. We want to surprise you with how we bring poetry and prose into your everyday life, as Seamus Heaney said, to catch the heart off guard and blow it open. We believe that literature and art are for everyone. If you're new to writing, don't worry, it's a skill you can learn. And as you do, your inner artist will start to shine through. We like to remember what Frank McCourt said, keep scribbling, something will happen. We believe that the act of writing is what really makes one a writer. It's like a ritual, and rituals are the heart of art. In our programme we focus on creating high quality, short run titles that everyone can enjoy. We encourage all writers, whether you're pursuing a serious career or writing for fun, seeking healing or striving for personal growth. over the years we've produced a wide range of works, from poetry to history, memoirs, novels, short stories, and a variety of other kinds of prose. Books, even with their old technology, are still a powerful way to connect people and communities. We're proud that our books capture snapshots of living and evolving culture, and that they will last for many years to come as a record of events, people, places, feelings and ideas. We hope that this legacy will be passed on to future generations of writers, artists, singers, scribblers and folklorists, especially those with a love for Limerick City and County and our beautiful surrounding lands. Sometimes, as Samuel Beckett is said to have put it, words are all we have. The words in the book that we're launching tonight, Slipstreaming in the West of Ireland, are a superb exemplar of this philosophy, in the same way as John's Arias of Consolation before it. We're really proud at Revival Press to be publishing Jim and John's new collection. As Tom said, it is a book of vivid memories and the retracing of adventures, a journey through Clare and Galway, a journey as well through language and culture, but also the journey of a developing friendship. The pieces in the book are punctuated with a selection of fantastic pictures, which also help capture the spirit of these places and moments that Jim and John experienced on the way, as well as, I think, the spirits of the writers themselves. They hardly need an introduction from me, but Jim and John have been stalwarts of the poetry scene since the days depicted in some of these poems, and have been friends as well of the Limerick Writers Centre since its early days, going out for weekly readings in the White House. Together they founded the Stony Thursday Book in 1975 and have gone on to be widely published in Ireland and beyond. I personally was lucky to receive Jim's generous advice when I was putting together my own first book a few years ago, and I hope that I can follow the fine example that both of these writers have set in encouraging or in continuing to encourage emerging writers in and around Limerick in the years to come. Mar sin có gorgeous a pre Jim agus John Tásúla gom go make gachra ar an hour shop. It's fantastic to see so many people here in this beautiful venue tonight to celebrate this book launch, and just to remind everybody that buying the book supports the writers themselves, but also other local writers too. But more important than that, it really is a pleasure to read and reread these poems. So with that said, on behalf of Limerick Writers Centre and Revival Press, a big shout out to John and Jim for letting us publish their latest work. Thanks as well to the People's Museum of Limerick for hosting us again, to Anton Floyd for the upcoming official launch, and a special thanks to our team at Limerick Writers Centre, especially Loch Bender for her design work on this book and for the many books that she helped us craft over the years. Here's to a great evening.
Thank you very much, Tommy Collins. Now a brief word regarding Anton Floyd, who will officially launch the book. Anton Floyd was born in Cairo, a Levantine mix of Irish, Maltese, English and French Lebanese. Raised in Cyprus, he lived through the struggle for independence, and Cyprus remains close to his heart. Educated in Ireland, he studied English at Trinity College Dublin and continued his postgraduate studies at University College Cork. Married to Limerick-born artist Carol Ann, he lives in West Cork. Anton Floyd.
Hello everyone. I just want to start by telling you that I had an anxiety dream last night, or this morning, and I was in a tiered theatre and there were very few people. I turned up at 7 o'clock as my wife had advised me to do, and there were very few people, and someone who was supposed to be introducing the evening said we better wait for people to come, and people did come, and the whole place filled up with faces that I didn't recognise. And then at about 8:15, a troop of young lads came in, and there was no room to sit, so they sat on the floor, and a trestle table came out, and they laid out medals and a cup, and this man wearing a plaid suit, permed curly hair, stood up and started talking about Limerick hurling. And football, and apparently this is a medal ceremony, and I thought, oh my God, well at least I'm in the right place. So I've devoted about 9 minutes to each of these wonderful poets, so I crave your patience. Firstly, let me say how delighted and honoured I am to be here to help launch John and Jim's collection, Slipstreaming in the West of Ireland. I got to know them both in the early 1970s, when we were at the very beginning of our respective poetry lives. The photo of the two of them on page 9 is precisely how I remember them all those years ago, and an exciting time it was too. And here we are now, let's say in our more mature years, old friends, a little further on that poetry trajectory. This collection is about encounters. The poems record and explore a joint impulse to move beyond their own given realities. They write poems about their conversations, their friendship, the people they meet, and the places where they encounter them. The landscape, the seascapes, the geologies of Clare, Galway and Connemara feature as you would expect. Rather than being a surface travelogue, the two poets each dig deep into their experiences, seeking a way of talking about the impact on them of the facts of the land, the waters and the rock. In the process, there emerges a sense of an impending threat to time-honoured ways of life. There are poems of social commentary. Some are set in hostelries or on the way to or from them. In talking about these things in a clear-sighted language that avoids nostalgia, they chronicle how their poetry evolved in them, how the outward journey was in effect a search for an authentic voice. As John puts it in triptych, the search for a song to sing. And again, more explicitly in the poem Searchlight, he writes, Our tent about to take flight for one of the 12 bends, until a rainbow conjured itself, and through its arc light we passed, sailing the high road in search of our crock of words, a futile pursuit worth the effort for what the slant bestowed. In similar vein, Jim takes up the idea in his poem, Halcyon. Here he writes its slant, an approach Emily Dickinson would approve of. Here, on the outskirts of oblivion, we watched frogs jumping into a pond. Basho had done this centuries ago on his travels to a far province, and somewhere up around the bend, the sea waited for us. We could taste the salt in the wind. Maybe tomorrow or the next day we'd reach the sea and we'd jump in, filling the sound. In ancient Greek, thalata, thalata, the sea, was the cry of joy when in 401 BCE the roaming 10,000 Greeks saw the Black Sea after a failed march against the Persian Empire. It was for them a sign that home was not far away. Mine may be a fanciful reading, but I read the poem as a conflation of their quest to discover a sense of belonging in a wordscape. The OED definition of the word slipstream states it as an assisting force regarded as drawing something along behind something else. The some things in this case are the friends, cyclists, poets on ordinary bikes without leather panniers. It is such an appropriate title for the collection as it suggests not only the creative interplay between the two wayfarers, but describes also the alternating arrangement of groups of poems by each poet. This patterning also reflects how poems talk to each other thematically and draw the collection onwards into the landscape and inwards into their individual psyches. I would strongly urge readers to engage with the poems in this way, to discover how this patterning develops in subtle and satisfying ways. One such example of this interplay can be found between John's poem Freewheeling and Jim's The Rocky Place. A reading of the two poems in juxtaposition shows how involved the poets are in poetry dialogue. Both poems demonstrate an eye for the physical detail of the terrain, the appreciation of the transient moment, the sense each poet has of his comrade traveller, their being together and separate, as well as the uncertainties of what the future holds for them. For John, this concluding idea finds expression in the imagery of the last of the fire and darkness closing in, while for Jim, it's the narrowing sight lines he has of John getting narrower and narrower, bend by bend. The idea in Freewheeling of reaching a port of call resonates with Jim's poem Halcyon, cited earlier. Note too how the penultimate and prescient lines in Jim's The Rocky Place, I catch glimpses of you getting narrower and narrower, bend by bend, relate to John's poem Against the Odds, in which he acknowledges how a developing bond in and out of school became the work of becoming ourselves when we discovered difference, and tells how they drifted apart for a time, yet through it all, the word kept us in touch. In his preface, John talks of how the project is an attempt to rewrite a lost journal. In July of 1972, we embarked on a cycling trip with a writing journal filled with swapped entries, sometimes poems, sometimes prose. Somewhere, somehow, over time, we mislaid the journal. During many conversations, we reflected on the lost journal, and finally we decided to probe the past and revisit the spirit of our odyssey. A near miraculous achievement of these two poets in this collection is that they manage a temporal bifurcation. In looking back over a vista of 50 years, they manage with remarkable immediacy to evoke their younger selves. And in doing so, they have made poems that carry the weight of mature reflection and the versatility of a lifetime's practice. In Jim's case, the opening sequence of haiku fixes his experience of nature with a taut economy of expression. It is a writing that stays with you. It roots the experience in his language and makes Jim a poet deeply aware of inscape. Here's one to savour. Pale bog moon orbiting the hare's eye. Pale bog moon orbiting the hare's eye. The illustration of the hare by Vivian Bogle on page 16 is the perfect complement for the haiku that marries the bog moon to the hare's eye. The collection shows how a poet offers individual and deep perspectives of people living in the environment, living on, through, and up against its geology and history. They take the most ordinary seeming lives and make them extraordinary in such a way that every reader can learn to look at his or her own life and place in the world and see it freshly, more vividly. Take as an instance John's poem, Inside the Barren Rock. Note the magic-making scene at the first stanza, as well as the music of the unobtrusive rhyme scheme. From a precise angle in a particular light at a certain time of day, we saw 7 white horses ride out of the cave set into the rock face, and to our delight we made camp in a strange field, soft as eiderdown, denuded of stone by generations of hands, to make of it a grassy bed for something healed. And at the foot of the slope was a lake surrounded by rushes, a fortress for swans and mallards who dallied at the mouth of the stream that snaked down to the sea, which we followed and swam in as it might suddenly disappear. The poem doesn't stay here, though, as John, in a masterful, I might say, Yeatsian stroke, moves to the coeval troubles in the north, and we become aware how this land has been politically and violently contested. To wander in this idyll, how many flaps of a blackbird's wing it takes to survey the work of a boundary commission, its wings splattered by innocent blood, a bogside massacre in its crazed eyes. To contemplate such savagery in 72 was to weep for the creviced orchid. And even though Jim acknowledges that they were here on the outskirts of oblivion, he equally was all too aware of the cultural and historical hinterland, the political and social complexities that are its legacy. We see this in his poem Landscape at Closing Time, complemented so well by Charles Harper's print, Window. Here's Jim's poem. And memory survives, amused how, out of the blue, the Farrantee closed up early one afternoon to let you and I off to the stone-heaped cliffs, guillemots, herring gulls, and the drooping flowers that swayed in the slightest breeze. There we sat reading, mine an old story. Someone flew too close to the sun. I got up and stepped closer to the edge, as if I might see the tumbled bones of history below. Here, Jim combines an eye like Kavanagh for place, and with Yeats's penchant for citing classical myth. In this instant, Jim transfers the Greek myth of Icarus into his immediate reality. The final 3 lines are so good, I have to read them again. I got up and stepped closer to the edge, as if I might see the tumbled bones of history below. In his narrative piece, Another World, John shows the interconnected lives of the inhabitants, the animals, the daily work, the intrigue, the psychological and spiritual dramas in a part of provincial Ireland in the early 1970s. It is a way of life we feel won't last, what with encroaching modernity and tourism. Yet there isn't a note of nostalgia in the mood of the short narrative. Rather, there is respect and a recognition of a deep humanity that is very moving. As Norman Nicholson, the wonderful Cumbrian poet, puts it, it is in our intense concern with what is close to us that we most resemble the people of other countries and other times. John develops this idea in the poem On the Way that comes appropriately at the end of the collection. The poem carries us to empty Tianjin, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, where he is lost in the sultry glow of its lantern light, along greyhound interstates of emotion, and the Song Van River to the Bích Dong Pagoda in Vietnam. In the final stanza he states the central concern of the poet, the pursuit of self. It is the longest journey of all. Jim too comes to the same Delphic understanding in his poem, Gnosis asafton, know thyself. In the poem The Allurement, the island hasn't moved, only grey stones darkened under the white stars. In the wash rattling the shingly beach, only rock music. When the day is gone, one must be okay within oneself, go deeper into what this place lacks. Oftentimes in life, we may easily become dulled and denatured. It is by the poet's eye and thought that our experiences can be transformed and understood. The process of becoming re-aware of the familiar, paying it deep attention and thus discovering and sharing its value is, I suggest, at the heart of good writing, which prefers to avoid grand gestures of romanticism. It is the poetry of the extraordinary in the ordinary. Our relationship to nature may be subject to change, but its allure remains always dear, always selfed. In speaking about avoiding gestures of romanticism, Jim is equally adept as John in creating narrative. The short prose poem Daddy, although not autobiographical, fits into the collection as a record of how confined a family can be by the patriarchal habits in Ireland of that time. The children inside the house listening, waiting, while a black cat darted for cover under the overgrown hedge. Daddy's long nose could sniff the hall for a whiff of something to eat, his loud mouth bound to shatter the peace. This would spur any sensitive soul and budding poet to search for a more fulfilling existence. Jim's The Red Barn, too, is a prose poem tour de force. If you're looking for an Irish version of Gothic Americana, you need look no further. The narrative inspiration at its core is the tragic murder and subsequent hauntings in Suffolk, England, of Maria Martin by her young lover, William Corder, a story told in traditional ballads and broadsides. Check out Shirley Collins and the Albion Band's version, Murder of Maria Martin. But it is the atmospheric storytelling of the Tom Waits song, Murder in the Red Barn, from his album Bone Machine, that Jim draws his inspiration to make an equally haunting and surreal poem with apocalyptic qualities. There's not enough time here to go into its marvels. Besides, I don't wish to spoil your reading pleasure. Suffice to say that through the technique of sequential layering, the images build to create a powerful feeling of foreboding and foreshadowing. What it leaves me with is the sense that the countryside has always been the progenitor of captivating storytelling, and precisely that is what this book is about. There is an interesting interplay in the connection between the visual image and the written word, not just in the similes and metaphors both poets use, but also in the many wonderful graphic illustrations that punctuate the collection. Additionally, there are a number of ekphrastic poems that take their inspiration directly from paintings or sculpture pieces. Jim's A Bronze Famine Cart by John Bean, homage to Jack B. Yeats, and the future pulses in the stone's heart after a stone carving in Furbo, while there's John's poem From Three Paintings by John Shinners. It would be no exaggeration to say that many of these poems would serve admirably as companion pieces to Paul Henry paintings. In fact, John explicitly refers to this in the poem Mirage. Like turf smoke, straw, a scene painted by Paul Henry, you and I going over the hill to leave it all behind for others to harvest what we reaped. The harvest for John Liddy, and perhaps the most important crop of this project for him, is his relationship to Gaeilge. The three-part poem, Reconstructed Dialogue with Language, is his manifesto expressed in the persona of the language itself. The first poem is part lament, part challenge, part defiance. The opening stanza sets the tone. Don't be deluded, I am not dead. Unlike a many-sister root, survival is my strength. But even should I tread extinction, I will linger forever to smell in the nostril its stain on the ground, a permanent reminder of betrayal. Part 2 of the poem is a listing of the flame carriers of Irish and the manner of how the language and its traditions have survived through the works of great writers, even in English. After citing important works and the authors meaningful to John, the poem ends, Hartnett's celebrated Anglo-Irish stew, Ní Donald's Cuir Van Uisce, done in Muldoon's inimitable hue. Or what are you to make of it at all, at all? The probing and sprouting, keeping me alive for the long haul. Part 3 is an optimistic paean to the language that ends with these lines, so that words renewed might strike an inclusive chord, take flight with songbirds. If this poem serves as a survey and overview of the state of the Irish language, the bilingual poem Ermochanga, On My Tongue, is John's love song to the language, to his rediscovery of it as one with the fabric of the land itself and its people. In a way, I see the survival of the language as emblematic of the survival of poetry itself against all odds. The cover image by Jim's talented daughter, Aisling Burke O'Connor, is untitled, but I understand it is the view from the bridges of Ross near Loop Head. It is no romantic take on the land and seascape. The fence post is so weathered by the Atlantic that it could be cut from the limestone pavement of the burn. The wind and the long grasses, the barren cliff face, the rolling waves, the summery sky, all combine to create a powerful mood to guide the reader into the collection, locating it firmly along the western seaboard. Place, memory, time, and humility before it all is made palpable throughout the collection, and we are deftly reminded of this in the epilogue, Wheels for Eyes by John. Rearing for the road, like cattle left out after wintering in the shed, the kaleidoscope slows to a stop, but the wheel spins without us. Indeed, this collection, quoting Joyce, ably demonstrates that memory is imagination. Let me finish with my Limerick mother-in-law's toast, Oscaria. I raise it to John, to Jim, to poetry, to Dominic Tom and Revival Press. So we have a glass. So, Slánta gone slide on, Cree forlorn, Bollock lawn, agus gob fluch. Congratulations.
As a magisterial few words heralding the launch of Slipstreaming, kind of reminds me that it brought you from the very eloquent Anton Floyd. Thank you, Anton. Some of us grew up listening to the clash of the ash, and were this literary soiree taking place in the Gaelic grounds, we would have arrived at this epochal happening, throwing in the ball, but insurance dictates that I hold on to it. Ladies and gentlemen, and whatever order the two troubadours decide, Jim Burke, John Liddy and Jim Burke.
Anton Floyd is a hard man to follow. But so is John Liddy. So I get one between. Thank you, Tom. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. It's great to see such a crowd. Our grateful thanks go to Dominic Taylor and Lot Bender of Revival Press for their dedicated work in Slipstreaming. Thanks also to George Smith, Frank McGowan and Andy Murphy. A very special thanks to all the artists featured in the book: Diala, Dietrich Blaudo, Vivian Bogan, Charles Harper, Aisling Burke O'Connor, Sarah O'Carrillo, David Wilburn and Brian McMahon. Thanks also to Sean Curtin and Pilar Gutierrez dos Los Rios for pictures of the authors. We're delighted to have the wonderfully gifted poet Anton Floyd with us tonight, and we thank him for his close reading of Slipstreaming and for launching this collection. Thanks to Jean, Pilar and Jimmy. Thanks to Marion, who's selling the bookstore there. And thanks as always to John. It is a joyful experience to be involved in a poetry venture with you. Slipstreaming came about after many years of deliberation and lamentation of a lost journal that we'd written together in our teens and we cycled around the west of Ireland. I'd like to begin with a sonnet that was written after a stone carving I saw in Forbrook, County Galway. The inscription on the carving became the title of the poem. The future pulses in the stone's heart. That flat stone has skimmed 5 bounces or more, and I swore I'd pluck up the courage to ask you out. Or that stone I dug up in the sizzling heat, the stone I stole from the singing shore, or the patient smooth stones, blank-faced, bare, without a letter or a word, somewhere in the future waiting to be chiselled, or that big stone dotted with efflorescence that I climbed on top of to sit down and watch the river flow, or island stones flung about of a Sunday afternoon, out of sight of priests and polis, the practice carried off by island men when they gathered on weekend afternoons to fling American stones around in Boston while they yearned for home. I enjoy reading and writing haiku poetry, as Anton mentioned. They're short tree-line poems that emerged in Japanese literature during the 17th century. Matsuo Basho, a master of these poems, said, "Haiku is simply what's happening in this place at this moment." So the tradition is you read the haiku twice normally. Reading some sort of order in the winding path. Reading some sort of order in the winding path. And I'll just read the pale bog moon one once because I don't read it twice. Pale bog moon orbiting the hare's eye. Out from the ditch and into the ditch, a fox's tail. Out from the ditch and into the ditch, a fox's tail. Trooping birches, a whisper of snow before sleep. Trooping birches, a whisper of snow before sleep. A poetry workshop I attended mentioned found poetry. The tutor said, shopping lists are a good place to look for a found poem. Billboards, DIY books are a good place to find existing texts. Some weeks later, with my brothers on a walkabout in Dingle, in a shop window there was a tree-liner written in large letters inside a window. It needed no reordering. 3 lines like a haiku form. Free beer, all day, tomorrow. Backshore reimagines some carefree optimism from the early 1970s. Backshore. We take our pick following spidery legs of roads that lead us to the water's edge. Rumbling rivers reach to, singing and draining, hurling to the sea. It feels like we are trumpeting all day, searching for a lovely wild place. At these moments we can do anything. Go barefoot in the water, scramble over beach rock. We can swan watch from the dunes or listen to oyster catchers wading in the surf. We can talk any kind of talk we want. The way the water strikes the rock or the sand in its simpler world. This next poem recalls Kilfenora in County Clare. It's called When We Came to a Place. When we came to a place where the passionate dead scattered around us might return, who lived 50 or 100 years ago, their bleak living that was worth its weight, the greatest effort of all to be able to haul things falling back into the wilderness. Stretched roses rose up a graveyard wall, fiercest the memory of creating a self. A rag, a heart, a bone, a wall of tongues, double meanings, inventing and reinventing resilience. We sat down in Kilfenora. Fields had become a green coat buttoned by limestone. We knocked on the door of philosophy and claimed together that life is lived in moments. There was no one present to share our discovery. Early sunlight that cut night from turf and made its way from someplace into our boots and breakfast cups. After a long hiatus from poetry around 2008, I embarked on a distance learning course at the University of Lancaster, where I studied with the wonderful Scottish poet Elizabeth Burns. Sadly, Elizabeth died of cancer in August 2015. A year or so later, I wrote a poem for her called The Tutor. But before I read that, I'd like to read one of Elizabeth's poems, just to give you an idea of the type of character she was. The poem is called Grandmother. Grandmother carries the good Scots tongue in her head all the way to London, where it becomes like the kitchen china, worn and cracked with use. Kept in the press with the girdle and the spurtle, the ashet and the chili pan. The good china of English is what you bring out for visitors, kept in the cadenza with the key in its lock, lifted carefully onto the silver-plated tray. Remember which language you're speaking in. Then forget. So the poem I wrote for Elizabeth is called The Tutor. Say she lives across the sea. Say you write to her and she sends a poem back. Say the poem is like a gift, with grains of salt sparkle to flavour the good soup, the ripe tomatoes. Say the poem is like a prayer, stretching itself over the salty sea. Say her words are scattered and sprinkled like salt. Say they lift the flavour of the good soup, the ripe tomatoes. Say the poem is like a little glazed bowl she sends from the east coast of Scotland. Approaching slipstreaming, I found a way into the book by creating ekphrastic poems that are concerned with pieces of art. In this case, art from Ireland's past. I saw Jack B. Yeates' wonderful painting titled On Through Silent Lands, and I wrote this. Homage to Jack B. Yeats. A man in a psychedelic overcoat and with no face starts across the lake light. Red cattle lie under the elms, but we cannot see them. What looks like milk is just a river spilt over the grass. Blackbirds hide in thick leaves that we do not see. A bridge of foxgloves has broken into bells, and rigid mountains with luminous lakes coming from, going somewhere, rises in the silent land. His webbed feet fill with drowsy pleasure. Hadn't I almost forgotten that something in me belongs to these things? And I'd just like to finish with a very short poem called You Won't Forget Me. Down in the field where the grass frog jumped, you leaned in the gate and smiled at me. I smiled back, but your smile went on and on and on.
That was Jim Burke. John Liddy.
Put on a special tie, which contains all the books that Revival Press Sheila's book, Anton's book,
John, we can't
Mike's
afford
book,
to keep going like that.
Mike's book, and Tommy's book, and anybody else's book you have. It's here, it's all here. And of course, Slipstreaming. It's all called Specialta Show, found out. Gormad with Tommy, August, Anton. It was Tom, you down. There's one word that sums up my feeling right now, and that's gratitude. It's an old word, but I really mean it. And so many friends here and people have just begun to know again, and also people I've just met. I'm delighted actually to be here. I'm going to read a few. I think I'll start with that freewheeling that Anton mentioned. I deliberately use the Limerick spelling. I don't finish the word with G. Freewheeling. In spite of the load on our backs and our envy of those Germans with their leather pannier bags, we were propelled to fulfill the day's quota of miles, to reach our port of call before nightfall and set up camp on a spare bit of ground outside a village, trace the flames' moonlit detail, fodder for the eye on the road here, a flickering slideshow to transmogrify the journey so far, both aware we might never know freedom like this again. The last of the fire doused, darkness closing in, tomorrow's stage ahead, each to our own shared destination. And I think that was one of the learning curves, or the learning lessons on the journey as well, between Jim and myself. We realised, travelling together, that we were also almost on a separate road, but we were together. And that was that this was coming through in what we were writing. That hair keeps looking at me. Mirage. And I also wanted to reiterate Jim's thank you to the artists. And I'm delighted to see people here representing some artists who have left us, Romney, and other people here whose poet partners are not here either, but I'll come to that in a moment. Mirage. Was that a wild daisy, a sprig of heather we just passed? A man sighing in a field, the scent of green to last a lifetime. Even as I write this now, touchable feather like turf smoke, straw, a scene painted by Paul Henry. You and I going over the hill to leave it all behind for others to harvest what we reaped. Maybe memories are made of this. Illusions lived with a passion last the longest, for better or worse, steeped in possibility, reinvigoration, another deception perhaps, or a hazy recreation of part without parcel, words borrowed from times once lived, unfaithful servants of the echo shell. Viewed from isolation with pen in hand, an act of mining the mind for the page, memories still intact until memory itself decides to no longer engage. To catch a whiff again of odours we thought lost to us, to have adored that time in the fullness of limited resources, to have left some record for O'Grady's approval, acceptance from cousin James, a life in exile with its harsh demands on tenacity, aided by a dose of Joycean guile, perceptibility of the tactile in the leaf's smooth underbelly, awareness fine-tuned to sense a cloud in the guise of Machiavelli, lingering overhead to release its almighty, unmerciful deluge, the observant eye not caught off guard even in old age. Anton referred to the one and only poem, Oscar in this little collection, but I'm delighted that it's there. Ermoyama. Vi tu I goni andomsa, ec fanach lastig den gwe, ec corda quid ama fuetor, erlona ata taresh fos, I molana mona, I gair in a hoiga, nies faida, non men yesh. I goni andomsa e geistok le fos, banat piesa versalta, mar an tlain to shop, mar leiscéil ar a ghlacha có fada sin con tú I ádil a ríis slán agus láidir on my tongue. You were always there for me, waiting within the wind, spending your time in the bush, on an overgrown lane, in the smell of the turf, in the laughter of youth, beyond middle age, always there for me, listening to horror, a blessing, a piece of verse, like this salvation, an excuse for taking so long to find you again, safe and strong. And I'm going to do something unforgivable. I'm going to take out my mobile phone and I'm going to read, because I forgot, Jim has sprung a surprise on me. Because he read a poem for a friend of his, I want to read a poem for a friend of mine. But of course, I don't know how to go about printing this out in a place that, is not going to allow me to print, perhaps. So anyway, it's here. I hope it's here. It is. And I'd like to read it for Edna, who's here in amongst us there. And I wrote this for a dear friend of ours who passed away last year. And I think it's not that sad now anymore, honestly. 100 years of poetry for Edna, Dunstan and Morgan. Hag's Head is miserable tonight as it recites Canute's work among a timeless litany and one deserving of its song. So listen now for that western roar, renewing you and Canute all the way across the Atlantic to County Clare. And I'll put away that and finish with another little homage called Doolin Voices, and curiously I dedicated this to Michael Cody, who has since also left us. They speak to me still between the notes of concertina, flute, bodhrán and whistle. In the lilting voice of local and visitor, in silent onlookers who have no choice but to keenly listen and watch with relish the evening's gaiety as night closes in, on the walk home, where the sea lashes the headland, a house with a single room.
Thank you very much, John Liddy. Now, that's about the size of it, as we say. And we cut out element in the proceedings where I craved the audience's indulgence, for God's sake, for the sanity of the authors and the poor, demented publisher. Give a little. Buy 2 copies, buy the whole lot, go mad. Anyway, having done all that, find your discreet way to the drinks table and behave like decent Christians. Now, the next happening here in this jollification is will be Gabriel Rosenstock, and he'll be launching his newest collection, Headlines, X-Writing. Okay, Shinawil, Slán Will, good night.